Because guess what, baby? The wizard is simply a weak man. She was like, "You ain't got no power. What are you doing with this?" Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It a Bean. This is another at-home edition of the podcast. And honestly, I'm liking the little at-home vibe. I don't got to worry too much. Production don't got to be out there. It's easy to edit type situation. It's nice to just give some unfiltered thoughts. You feel me? Today, we're going to talk about Wicked. I just saw Wicked for the first time. I understand. Why you only saw it for the first time, man? It doesn't matter. I saw it. Now I'm here. I arrived. You feel me? But I'm gonna talk about some of my initial reactions and some of my thoughts coming from this movie, this film. Really, really stellar performances, particularly from Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Really, really dope duo right there. And so I know we've been making fun of the press tour, but honestly, they really taking it for real. And I'm a theater person. So if you're new here, my name is Marquise Davon. Nice to meet y'all. Oh, you see this here mug? Yeah, you can go and order that real quick too. Okay. I'm gonna put that link down in the link below so you can just enjoy this. You see that? Oh, it's so nice. It's so nice. It's so pristine. It's so new. Yeah, get into it. Yes. And my background is actually in theater studies and then also broadcast journalism. My background is in theater studies. Particularly, I studied abroad to go see what theater for social justice was like. And so it was really cool going to the Czech Republic and getting to study the theater and history of that space, right? I was able to then bring that home, decide I was like, I want to be no theater major. And then they did the theater studies degree. And I found that to be a little bit more exciting because that meant that I could focus a little bit more on dramaturgy, but it didn't require me to build things because these hands are not meant for manual labor. But then also, it didn't mean that I was obligated to perform every single semester. This actually meant that I get to serve in a little bit more of an assistant director role or the dramaturg's role. And for those of people who don't know, who's like, what is a dramaturg? What is that? It's just a fancy name for a person who studies the world of the theater. And so, what I had the privilege to do was really just focus a little bit more on what are the words, what's the social, economic, and political surroundings of why a play may have been created, what is the language. And so, my job is really to help the role of the actors and really understand. Hey, you might miss a little bit of nuance, but here's how you can flesh out your character a little bit more. Here's what's actually happening. And so I can marry this idea of the artist's intent, but then also the playwright's intent, but also help the actors find their role as truthfully as possible and round out their characters as much as possible. And so for me, I got to do that with a focus in lynching dramas. And I really talked a little bit more around how lynching dramas are still connected to dramas of today. The violence just simply enacts a little differently. And so if you're starting to catch my drift, that's a little bit more around like what I studied in the form of theater and why I believe that theater and storytelling is such an important mode to be an avenue. I don't think it's the end all be all, but at least be an avenue for social and political change. We need the arts in order to do so. And I believe, especially now being able to watch Wicked, it makes me wonder and wants to complicate a little bit more of like my original politic, right? And more so the role of theater and art that plays a role. I still think it's one of the most important things that we're going to need of today's time. I just don't know if I fully am still invested in the idea that people are able to consume work, consume content, consume art in a way that's critical enough for them to really understand why it's important that they are engaging with this art in much more of a critical manner. Because in reality, I'm like, dog, we're talking about the bystander effect in here. We're talking about class. We're talking about race. We're talking around access and opportunity. And it's all through the lens of Shiz University, Elphaba and Glinda, and how education can particularly play a role in here too. And so even for them going to a university, this was also very fascinating to see how the world of thought can be perverted. This school can also serve as a way to add only into complicity. Um, is that, is that right? It's all right. Check me. It's all right. I was an English teacher, so I should know better, but whatever. But those who are complicit in oppressive systems, right? And so I was really interested to see like how all of this kind of played a role. And so yes, as you're watching this video, there are going to be spoilers. This is essentially I'm creating a video with in mind that somebody has already watched this and they are just coming to see a different form of commentary around it. It's not fully thought out, not fully fleshed out, but I do find it to be important. So the first thing that I'm getting into is my good sis Elphaba. She said the green. I got the green. Put a little thought behind it. But Elphaba's character, she is born green and immediately she is shunned, not just from society, but she is shunned away from her father. But the person who took care of her the most was an animal, right? That was the person who was her caretaker, essentially her nanny, and made sure that she saw every little thing that was going on. But she did her best she did what she could to protect Elphaba, meanwhile still having to play her role, right? Because there's still a power dynamic that happened as early as the first 5 minutes of the movie, right? And I found that to be interesting because that theme of being a bystander to somebody else's oppression without wanting to negotiate your own space happens in the beginning of the film and continues to go and evolve pretty much into the university, but more particularly when I watch Glinda's character also play a role in being complicit. And I think it's interesting because Elphaba's character, especially as she is going through it, she understands what it means to be othered. She understands all of that because she cannot hide it. And I love, people got, niggas gotta be green. I said, look at Piccolo. If this was Piccolo's world, okay. But no, it's not because it's a black woman, okay? A green woman on top of that. So let's really get into that, right? And so I think the idea of being complicit in oppressive systems, it gives a little bit more nuance. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it does give a little bit more nuance into how people have to negotiate when they want to stand up and when they choose not to. And so I thought it was interesting when we talk around the nanny at first, because the nanny essentially knows the truth. When all those kids are making fun of Elphaba and her sister screaming, the kids are the reason her sister's screaming, right? And then they get the reaction. And so even in those moments of her being able to stand up for herself, making sure that her and her sister were okay, she's still punished for believing what she believed in. She's still punished because people are moving without enough context. And I think that is important because it plays a role in how humans kind of operate. When you are othered, you are consistently seen as the problem despite your reasoning. People don't care about your reason, but people do see the consequences of how they treated you. And I think consequences is an important thing to kind of name because Elphaba, is doing nothing wrong. But the consequences of leaning into her different, leaning into her other, and the fact that she can't hide it, that says something to me. And I think it's how it also connects to the outside world. So again, loved how they were able to kind of give us that origin story. Hated how everybody was treating her. Did not like that down. No, not even close. So get rid of it. But then our good sis goes to college. She's not even trying to be in college for real. She was like, "This is my sister's time to be able to do this." Her sister, that's another story for another day because I said, "Girl, it's not always about you." And she didn't even want it to be about her. They always say she's making a spectacle and show. What's she supposed to do every time she walk into a room? Don't piss me off. Anyways, then we get into the university setting. And again, this is not formulated. I just saw this, so we out here together. But when we get to the university, I'm like, dog, it's just the idea that a place for progressive thought is still like aesthetics don't matter here. Yeah, we're not gonna get into this too much, but you're green, everybody else is normal. We should fix you. Glinda says, "Oh, when I become a better witch, I can fix you." I said, "Not this mediocre girl in the pink and the blonde. Don't do it. Don't do it." But again, it's important to note because pink, blonde, demure, cutesy, innocent, damsel in distress appeals to the aesthetic that everybody's looking for and comes from money. Everybody knows who her family is, despite the fact that she lacks skill. She's not a good witch. Everybody know it. Everybody knows. But because of her proximity to power and access, people continuously allow her into these spaces. Again, she was also somebody who was never told no. So already off rip, they are playing in all of these tropes around white mediocrity immediately. And it's funny because I'm sitting there this entire film, I said, so white people love this film, but they don't know they're talking about their mediocre asses and the ways in which they stand by during oppression because they choose to try and benefit from this system, knowing damn well they see the terrible, terrible shit that this system has created for everybody. When you are able to bear witness to the plight of other people, to those who are othered, and you still choose to do nothing about it, bitch, get out my face. You get on my nerves, right? I'm again, I'm not no moral purist and all that good stuff. Like I am just as problematic as everybody else. However, I do see like as I'm watching this film, yes, everybody can be implicated in some way, shape, or form. And I said, y'all just gonna stand there? Y'all gonna act like right? Like Elphaba's doing anything wrong, right? Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Cynthia Erivo did what she needed to do. But for them to continue to treat her like that, that bothered me a lot. So I'm watching this film and I'm just like, there's no way white people can watch this and still not understand the allegory that's happening right in front of their faces. And that's the thing for me that ended up shifting how I thought around the reason I started doing theater in the first place. Anybody who has known me over these years knows my favorite thing. I believe that theater is the purest form of storytelling, which is why I believe that when people get to experience the theater or get to experience art, acting, you're entering into somebody else's world. I have to step in this person's shoes and get to know them. But also in that mode of theater too, there should be a catharsis, right? And in that catharsis should hopefully come a transformation. But that transformation has not been happening because I do believe that people are no longer fully invested in critically engaging with art. They only see art as a form of escape. They do not see art as a form of learning. I do believe that most theater should be didactic. Most times you're entering into a space, yeah, you're seeing somebody's story that is not yours. But when you see the story of someone that's not yours, you get to understand the nuances of a person a little bit more. Now, again, there are limitations to that because you have different tropes that are played throughout history, throughout theater, throughout art and film, because those are just popular characters that people are just kind of familiar with. But the idea of having a much more complex character seems a little bit more difficult for people in this moment because now I got to reckon with something in myself. And part of me believes that some people, there are a majority of folks who are willfully ignorant because they enjoy not having to know anything else. Because at least if I don't notice it, guess what that means for me? I don't have to do nothing about it. But not only that, this ignorance is bliss, but ignorance or turning a blind eye or being a bystander does mean that you are bearing witness to something, but you believe that your success will come at a different time. You believe that you can still work towards an aspiration that is fully up for grabs for you, but not for anybody else. And so as I'm like going through this film, I'm like having all of these feelings like, oh, but as I'm watching this, and so enjoying the music, loving the music, all of that down, and I cannot shake this feeling. There's no way this is the most popular film in the world right now, going number one at box office, and people are not having an engaged conversation, right? People can leave the theater and feel nothing around what happened in all of 2024, what's ultimately going to happen in 2025. And that's again why my politic began to I began to think about it a little differently. Granted, I'm only an hour and some change out of first watching the movie, and so I'm looking at this and I'm just like, I was inspired to talk because I'm like, dog, can my want of theater and storytelling still exist if people are no longer critically engaged with art, if people are not reading, if people don't understand history and how we got where we got? And I don't have an answer right now. This is also just like a public musing, right? For all intents and purposes, um, around what I enjoyed. And yeah, I got a mini outline. It's just a own little small. It's nothing too big. You feel me? No, 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 no. Um, but it made me think around how people are actively or not actively participating in the world anymore. I don't know if we can give people a mode to change because at this point in time, there's so much distancing that happens in a movie like Wicked, right? The person is green, the person's not black. So that can't be a black people problem. That's a green people problem. And that's how people are moving. But also, they don't have to come back to this. There's a moment to simply go and enjoy music and understand the allegories and just being able to simply take it the theme of if you believe in what you believe in, you should pretty much stand on business. Despite what everybody else is telling you, there is right and there is wrong. But in that idea of right and wrong, it's much more complicated than that. And that's where people don't want to go below the surface. Yes, believe in what you believe in, defy gravity. If you got to do it solo, you got to do it solo, which is the story of plenty of black women. If somebody got to get it done, so I'm gonna get it done. But even in that, um, I was sitting there. And it was just me in the theater, right? It wasn't anybody in there. I was like, all right, it's 10:45 on a Monday, people out for the holidays, whatever. And so I got to just sit there after, and it was just like made me think about the role of education. And so further on, I'm an educator. And in this world of education, and specifically te being a literature teacher, former literature teacher, um, it made me think around the role of the university. It made me think about the role of history and how that kind of all plays a role in terms of our development, our understanding of the world. And something that made me worry was watching when the professor, who's an animal, they don't want animals teaching history anymore. And he's just like, there's a real history here that we are ignoring because when we understand history, we understand our future. And if you're not going to look at how the past and the present will collide, we're going to just do the same thing over and over again. But not only that, when people are left ignorant, they are much more easy, they are a lot easier to mold, right? Because now I don't have to give critical thought because I may lack the life experience. I'm supposed to be around people who are supposed to be subject matter experts. And the politics of the university and the rest of the world is very key on perception. And that's the other piece about this film that they talk around is perception. Because guess what, baby? The wizard is simply a weak man. She was like, "You ain't got no power. What are you doing with this?" And so, because of this lore of the Wizard of Oz, because of how powerful he is said to be, but people who know, right? The woman who wanted to train Elphaba and was just like, I see your power, did not want to truly train her. She's not truly invested in her. She's invested in what she can do, right? Let me get the black woman, let me get the green woman as my mule in order for her to use her magic in order to convey the thought around like she can perpetuate the system for us. But in reality, Elba said, "Girl, I'm not with that. You're weak. You're weak. I'm more powerful than all of y'all in this room combined." But even then, it was too late when she already committed one of the first spells, which turned all of the monkeys into they got wings. They could fly because they're always looking at the birds, right? And even then, it felt like in the film when each of the animals tried to warn her in different ways, right? They try to warn Elphaba. So first it's her professor, and he is taken out of class, and immediately they go back and say animals in cages need to happen. Because guess what? They won't learn to speak. They don't have to learn anything else. And I sat there, I said, but aren't they all in a classroom, which is a metaphor for a cage, and then they're no longer learning, which means you are just simply allowing them to run the hamster wheel like everybody else? The fuck? It had me irked. So the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm just watching, I'm just like, dog, dog. Wild. And so I'm sitting there laughing. But again, it really just made me sit there and think around the ways in which education plays a role, the perception of the world plays a role in maintaining order to a degree. But what happens when you can no longer control the person that maintains the status quo? This person, Elphaba, is no longer interested. She was never actually interested in the status quo because she's never been part of the status quo. So she understands how the world completely operates in terms of treating those who are the most marginalized. And so this idea that politics are playing a role in the ways in which that we are developing our consciousness, the way that we're developing our political thought, the ways in which that we are also perceiving one another. They were in community with an animal who was a professor that she trusted. He's teaching the history of what happened to the people. What else are we seeing out of? Because when you strip somebody of the history, we're only able to perpetuate everything that just fits the narrative that we would like to see. When we're presented with new information, we should be okay to change our opinion. It should be okay to change our thought. But people are not invested in changing their thought when it keeps them in power, when it keeps them access, when it keeps them control. So when they talk around nobody mourning the wicked, Elphaba is not the wicked. The people are the wicked. The system is the wicked. And nobody's going to want to mourn them because guess what? They maintain the status quo. They are they are the aspiration. Elphaba's not the aspiration. Nobody wants to be outside. Nobody wants to be an other. And so when they talk around it, even when you think around how they open the film with the death of the Wicked Witch of the West, there is still there's this somberness around it too, because Glinda knows how good Elphaba is, how good she was. And so when we think around those people who are doing something different and stepping out on faith and very true and committed to their convictions, this is how you get an Elphaba. This is how people get to tell your story a little differently than what actually happened. Because the winners are the ones who dictate how the story is told. Those within the system can tell their story, which is the importance of griots. But in reality, when we think around wicked, we should think a lot more around who is truly wicked in this world. How does this allegory actually have relevance in our society today? Why is it resonating with so many people? Because once they watch it, they want to go back and watch it again and again and again, especially with the world that we are entering into in America. It's already there, but it's just going to get a lot harder in 2025. Okay. Okay. And beyond. So, in reality, I ain't got much else to say on this. I really enjoyed the movie for all intents and purposes. Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande were singing their asses off. And when I tell you, I just really enjoyed myself for all the musical person in me. I was singing along. So I was happy that I got to experience that by myself. But in reality, it did have me have a couple of thoughts. Um, but please, please, please go enjoy the film. I'm gonna also go back and rewatch it. I do encourage you, like, one, watch it for just entertainment and fun. The next time, watch it and think around, like, yo, how can I have a conversation with somebody about this film? And ask them their thoughts on each character. Ask them their thoughts on the motivation. Do they identify with why a person may have been motivated to move the way that they did? Do they understand a little bit? I'm super interested to see like how this movie can be used in conversation. That's the ideal. I don't think many people are gonna do it, but it's the ideal because I said, how the children of the chalk really not really y'all being willfully ignorant? Gross. Either way, this was a quick little keeping it a bean type situation. So please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell. My name is Marquise. Do not forget, get into it. Y'all see that? Yeah. Yeah. That mug is it's in the description box below. Get into it. Other than that, thank y'all for coming in for another episode. Peace.